Imagine standing outside the gates of an elite private school, your small shoulders trembling, your heart heavy not because of fear, but because you've been told you don't belong. "I'm poor, so they won't let me in," whispers an 8-year-old girl, her oversized glasses slipping down her nose, unaware that the man listening is a powerful CEO whose decisions could change everything. What happens when someone with influence chooses to see beyond the numbers, beyond the rules, and chooses humanity instead? How far does one act of kindness ripple through a community built on status and expectations? Can a child's courage challenge a system rooted in division and exclusion? And what does it mean for the man who thought he had already built a legacy, only to realize his true purpose was waiting on the other side of those gates? This story isn't just about money or privilege. It's about compassion, resilience, and the fight against invisible walls. It's about what happens when people dare to believe in each other, even when the world says they shouldn't. If you're ready for a journey that will touch your heart and challenge your views, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's dive into this powerful story together. The morning light slid through a soft curtain of Seattle fog, casting the city in a gentle silver hush. Nathaniel Carter stepped out of his black sedan at the edge of Willow Ridge Academy, the most prestigious private school on the north side of the city. He straightened his charcoal overcoat and took a slow breath. Even after all these years, the stone pillars and the gleaming brass plaque engraved with his family name, Carter still filled him with a private sense of awe. He had poured nearly 2 decades of vision and wealth into this place, believing that excellence should always come with opportunity. Today, though, the campus felt different. The wide lawns, manicured hedges, and grand glass doors radiated calm and order. But beneath that surface was a quiet tension. Nathaniel couldn't quite place a faint reminder that the world inside these gates was not, and had never been, perfect. He had come to Willow Ridge for a brief meeting with the board, a routine discussion about future investments and expanding the arts program. But as he passed the row of identical SUVs and watched uniformed students spilling out, Nathaniel's mind wandered to the city outside the academy's walls. He thought about the families who looked in through these iron gates but never made it inside. That was when he heard it, a quiet, broken sound, almost lost in the morning rush. Nathaniel paused on the sidewalk, glancing toward the stone entranceway. The sound came again, a muffled, shaky whimper. Just beyond the gates, partially hidden by the shadow of a tall oak, stood a small girl. She was thin and slight, maybe 8 years old, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, wisps escaping in the damp air. She wore a faded lilac jacket 2 sizes too big, jeans with patched knees, and scuffed sneakers. Her backpack, once pink, now faded and frayed, hung heavily from her narrow shoulders. She wiped her eyes, pressing the sleeve of her coat to her cheek. "They won't let me in," she whispered, not knowing anyone was listening, "because I'm poor." The words hit Nathaniel with a force that surprised him. He stopped, heart tightening, as memories flashed through his mind. His own childhood, nights spent in cramped apartments, his mother's hands stained with cleaning chemicals, the feeling of being invisible and small in a world that looked the other way. He stepped closer, his shoes quiet on the damp sidewalk. "Excuse me," he said softly, lowering his voice so as not to startle her. "Are you all right?" The girl startled, blinking up at him through eyes clouded with fear and embarrassment. Her cheeks were splotchy, red from crying. For a moment, she looked as if she might run, but instead, she drew herself up, chin trembling but held high. Nathaniel crouched to her level, careful to give her space. "My name's Nathan," he said. offering a gentle smile. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Zoe?" She whispered. "Zoe Harper." Nathaniel nodded. "It's nice to meet you." "Zoe, is there something I can help with?" She looked away, her voice a thin thread. "My mom. She couldn't pay this month. The lady at the office said I can't come in. Not until it's paid. She said the rules are the rules." Zoe's shoulders hunched, as if trying to make herself smaller. "I tried to wait, but it's cold. I don't want to go home." Nathaniel felt anger flare within him, not at Zoe, or even her mother, but at the sterile machinery of policy that could leave a child outside the gates of learning. He forced himself to breathe slowly, not letting the emotion show. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said quietly. "You know, I grew up in a place where people didn't always see me either. Sometimes rules forget about people's hearts." Zoe wiped her nose with the back of her hand, studying his face. She didn't recognize him. In that moment, Nathaniel was glad for the anonymity. He wanted her honesty, not her awe or fear. He looked up at the imposing school, then back to Zoe. "Would you like to come inside with me?" he asked. "I'll talk to the office. We'll figure it out together." She hesitated, searching his eyes for any sign of cruelty or trickery. Finally, with a tiny nod, she slipped her hand into his. Her fingers were cold and small, but her grip surprised him steadier than he expected. They walked side by side up the stone path. Nathaniel felt the gazes of staff and parents, some curious, others indifferent. He ignored them all. Inside the front lobby, the air was warm, filled with the low murmur of phones and the scent of polished wood. The administrative assistant at the front desk, a woman in her late 40s with sharp glasses and a sharper tone, looked up. Her eyes widened for a split second, recognizing Nathaniel, then settled into professional neutrality. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, glancing briefly at Zoe. "Can I help you?" Nathaniel kept his tone calm but firm. "This is Zoe Harper." She was turned away at the gate. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Park, please." The woman hesitated, glancing at Zoe's clothes, then nodded stiffly. "Of course. Please wait here." As they waited, Nathaniel glanced down at Zoe. She hugged her backpack to her chest, eyes darting between the ornate ceiling tiles and the doors leading deeper into the school. He reached out, gently adjusting her jacket. "You did nothing wrong. Zoe, remember that?" She looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. But before she could answer, the office door opened and Ms. Lorraine Park, the principal, stepped out tall, impeccably dressed, exuding an air of controlled efficiency. She offered a polite smile, masking surprise at the sight of Nathaniel. "Mr. Carter, I wasn't expecting you this morning," she said, shaking his hand. "Is there an issue?" Nathaniel straightened, letting his voice carry just enough steel. "There is. I'd like to discuss your admissions policy and what it means for students like Zoe." Zoe stood silently between them, watching, hope and anxiety mingling on her face. As the doors closed behind them, she clung to Nathaniel's words. "You did nothing wrong." For the first time that morning, she dared to believe he might be right. The principal's office at Willow Ridge Academy was the kind of place meant to impress. Sunlight streamed through tall, arched windows, illuminating shelves of hardbound books and rows of student achievement trophies. A glossy mahogany desk stood between the two adults and the small girl who fidgeted quietly in her chair. The faint ticking of a brass clock filled the silence. Ms. Lorraine Park, the principal, folded her hands and smiled with professional warmth, but there was a guarded edge in her gaze. Mr. Carter, I appreciate your concern for Miss Harper. However, we do have protocols in place regarding tuition. I assure you, we have offered her mother multiple reminders and payment options. Nathaniel Carter sat with one leg crossed, appearing calm on the outside, though his jaw was set. He glanced over at Zoe Harper, who sat with her backpack hugged to her chest, eyes fixed on a spot on the carpet. Every few seconds, she squeezed the frayed strap, as if it were a lifeline. Nathaniel turned back to Ms. Park. And what is the purpose of these protocols? Ms. Park. Is it to ensure only students with means are allowed to learn? The principal bristled, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle in her jacket. Of course not. Our scholarship and aid programs are quite robust, Mr. Carter. But there are still requirements, deadlines, documentation, the integrity of our admissions process. He leaned forward slightly, keeping his tone low and steady. If the process leaves a child sitting outside the gate, crying, then perhaps it's the process that's broken. For a moment, the room went quiet. Nathaniel could sense Ms. Park's discomfort, but he held her gaze. He felt an old, familiar frustration, rising a memory of his own mother, standing in too many waiting rooms, being told about rules that never seemed to bend. Ms. Park finally broke eye contact, turning her attention to a folder on her desk. Zoe's mother, Ms. Harper, missed last month's payment and has not responded to our latest notices. We're required to enforce policy. Mr. Carter, it's not personal. Zoe shifted in her chair, her small voice barely audible. My mom worked late last night. She promised she'd try again today. Ms. Park softened just a fraction, offering Zoe a measured smile. I know your mother works very hard. Zoe, this isn't your fault. Nathaniel watched the girl's face for any sign of relief, but Zoe seemed to shrink further into her chair, embarrassed by the attention. Nathaniel looked back at Ms. Park. Let's be clear. I'm not asking for an exception for Zoe alone. I'm asking you to consider the message you send to every student, to every family when a child is excluded over a missed payment. Ms. Park straightened her posture, drawing a careful breath. With respect, Mr. Carter, our school has a reputation to uphold. We cannot be seen as lax in our standards. He nodded slowly, recognizing the well-worn argument. He'd heard it in boardrooms, in banks, in every place where privilege became invisible and exclusion became policy. Before he could reply, the office door opened and a man in a gray suit stepped in. He was tall, with thinning hair and sharp, calculating eyes. Excuse me, he said briskly. I'm Henry Maddox, Chief Financial Officer. He nodded to Nathaniel, his voice cool but deferential. I understand there's a concern with tuition delinquency, Miss. Park gave a quick summary, and Maddox directed a polite but pointed question at Nathaniel. Mr. Carter, as a board member, I'm sure you understand the dangers of bending the rules. Where do we draw the line? If we allow one exception, what do we say to the others who sacrifice to pay on time? Nathaniel considered the question carefully. He knew Maddox's reputation a man of numbers, immune to sentiment, the kind of executive who never missed a decimal point. He answered quietly. The line should be drawn where policy begins to harm the people it was meant to serve. Rules exist for order, not for cruelty. Maddox arched an eyebrow. That's a noble sentiment, but the reality is that the school runs on tuition. Compassion doesn't pay for textbooks. Zoe watched the adults volley words over her head, her hands now twisting the strap of her backpack until her knuckles were white. Nathaniel caught her eye and offered a small, reassuring smile. He wanted to promise her that grown-ups could be kind, that justice could exist inside these walls. But he knew the world didn't always work that way. Ms. Park, sensing the impasse, rose from her chair. "Mr. Carter, perhaps we should discuss this privately, so as not to cause distress." Nathaniel shook his head. "Zoe deserves to hear what's being decided about her life." For a moment, Ms. Park looked uncertain. Maddox remained impassive, checking his watch. Nathaniel stood and addressed them both. "I'd like Zoe to be allowed to stay in class today while I speak with her mother and work toward a solution. If you refuse, I will personally sit with her in your office until we resolve this. I hope we can agree a child's education is more important than making an example out of her." There was a tense pause. Ms. Park finally nodded. "Very well. Zoe may join her class for today as a guest, but this is highly irregular." Nathaniel inclined his head. "Sometimes the right thing is." He turned to Zoe and bent to her level, meeting her uncertain gaze. "Go on. Zoe, I'll be right here when school's out." Zoe hesitated, then stood, clutching her backpack. "Ms." Park called a student aide to escort her down the hall. As Zoe disappeared around the corner, Nathaniel felt a mix of relief and quiet fury. The girl had not asked for special treatment. She had only wanted to belong. As the door closed behind Zoe, Maddox turned to Nathaniel. "I understand your concern, but the school cannot become a charity," Nathaniel replied, voice carefully measured. "Willow Ridge was built to lift children up, not turn them away." "That's the vision I invested in," Maddox responded. "Then perhaps it's time to revisit our vision." "Mr. Carter." "Times change. Expectations change." Nathaniel met Maddox's gaze and held it. He recognized the challenge and the threat beneath the words. He was no stranger to boardroom politics, but this felt different, raw, personal, urgent. He let out a slow breath, feeling a familiar weight press down on him. He remembered his own mother's pride, her refusal to accept handouts, her insistence that he earn every opportunity. He wondered if he was helping or hurting by intervening. He knew some would call this meddling others, favoritism, but he could not ignore what he had seen that morning, a small girl standing alone, her hope shrinking by the minute. "Ms." Park cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter, if you wish to discuss tuition aid, we can schedule a meeting with Ms. Harper this afternoon. I will need her to fill out updated paperwork." Nathaniel nodded. "I'll speak with her. In the meantime, please ensure Zoe is treated with the same respect and dignity as any student." "Ms." Park's eyes flickered with something almost like relief. Maddox only gave a small, practiced nod. Nathaniel left the office, his mind churning. As he walked down the hall, he saw families arriving, parents chatting easily with their children, teachers greeting students at their lockers. The world seemed to flow forward, untroubled, but Nathaniel knew that just outside the walls, for every Zoe, there were 100 more children waiting for someone to notice. He paused by a window, watching as Zoe was led to her classroom. She hesitated at the door, glancing back as if searching for an anchor. Nathaniel raised a hand, and she managed a tiny smile before vanishing inside. For a moment, he allowed himself to hope that things might change, that kindness might ripple out from a single brave act. But he also knew the change would not come easily. He would have to fight not only policies and protocols, but also the old, persistent belief that compassion was weakness and that success belonged only to those who could pay the price. As Nathaniel made his way outside, He resolved to meet Rachel Harper as soon as possible. He wanted to understand her story, to offer real help, not charity, not pity, but solidarity and respect. Stepping back into the gray Seattle air, Nathaniel Carter felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Today, he had kept one promise to one child. Tomorrow, he would have to keep it to many more. The morning fog had lifted, but the work ahead was just beginning. By noon, the clouds had broken into thin ribbons across the Seattle sky. Nathaniel Carter stood across from Willow Ridge Academy, his hands deep in the pockets of his coat, trying to make sense of the emotions storming inside him. He'd left the campus determined, but now as he walked the cracked sidewalk toward the Willow Street Cafe, he felt the familiar tension of being pulled in too many directions. The world expected him to be decisive, composed a man who never faltered. But today, the image of Zoe Harper alone at the gates haunted him, refusing to let him slip back into the comfortable detachment of leadership. He paused at the crosswalk, watching as cars streamed past, headlights winking in the shifting light. The cafe was only a block away, its bright red awning a small burst of color in the gray afternoon. He checked the message from Ms. Park one more time. Rachel Harper's work address, written in her precise, looping script. Nathaniel hesitated, wrestling with the awkwardness of what he was about to do. He knew what it meant to be approached by a stranger, to have someone offer help unasked for. He did not want to embarrass Zoe's mother, or make her feel small. He wanted only to understand, to listen. He told himself it was for the school, for the policy. But deep down, he knew it was about something older, the urge to right a wrong he'd once known himself. He pushed open the cafe door, a bell chiming softly above his head. The place was a swirl of late-lunch energy waitresses balancing trays, the hiss of the espresso machine, students in uniform huddled over textbooks. Nathaniel scanned the room and spotted her at once. Rachel Harper stood behind the counter, her brown hair pulled into a neat ponytail, her uniform a little faded at the elbows. She moved with efficient grace, wiping down tables, refilling sugar jars, pausing to share a soft word with a tired customer. There was something in her posture, shoulders squared, head high, that reminded Nathaniel of the women in his own family, women who bore more than their share, but never let the world see them bend. He waited until she was free, then approached the counter. Rachel glanced up, surprised by the stranger in a tailored coat, but she didn't shrink back. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice steady, only a hint of wariness in her eyes. Nathaniel offered a gentle smile. "Are you Rachel Harper?" She nodded, setting down the tray. "That's right. I'm sorry. Do I know you?" He shook his head. "Not yet. My name is Nathaniel Carter. I'm with Willow Ridge Academy." He saw the flicker of worry cross her face, the way her hands stilled on the countertop. "Is Zoe all right?" Rachel asked, her tone sharpening. "She didn't get in trouble." "Did she?" Nathaniel quickly shook his head. "No, not at all. In fact, Zoe's the reason I wanted to speak with you. May I?" He gestured to a nearby booth. Rachel glanced at the clock, then nodded. "Just a moment." She told a coworker to cover her tables, then slid into the seat across from Nathaniel, smoothing her apron as she sat. Up close, he noticed the faint circles under her eyes, the fine lines at the corners that deepened when she smiled. He began carefully. "I was at the school this morning. I saw Zoe outside the gates. She told me she couldn't come in because of the tuition issue." Rachel's mouth pressed into a line. She looked away, her jaw clenched. I'm sorry about that. I tried to call the school last night, but my shift ran late and she stopped herself, embarrassed. We're behind. I know. I thought they'd give us another week. Nathaniel listened quietly. You don't have to explain. I just want to understand. Rachel studied him, searching for judgment, finding none. She allowed herself a slow, shaky breath. I work 2 jobs here and evenings at the grocery store. I've tried every payment plan they offer. Last month, our rent went up and, well, something had to give. Zoe doesn't know. I didn't want her to feel it was her fault. There was a silence, thick with all the things she would not say aloud. Nathaniel felt a deep pang of recognition, the stubbornness, the pride, the fear of pity. She's a wonderful child, he said, bright, polite, thoughtful. She told me how much she loves school. Rachel's face softened, her shoulders relaxing just a little. She does. School is everything to her. I just want her to have chances. I never did. Nathaniel nodded, feeling the ache in her words. He recalled nights from his own youth when he'd studied by flashlight. His mother quietly doing math at the kitchen table to see what bills could be paid. May I ask, did the school help with aid or scholarships? Rachel's expression twisted, half regret, half resignation. They gave me paperwork, forms, income statements, letters of hardship. I filled them all out. Sometimes I wonder if anyone ever reads them. I spent hours trying to explain. But every time there's a new deadline, another form, I guess we just slipped through. Her voice faltered. Then she shook herself. It's not their fault. There are families worse off than us. Nathaniel felt a flash of anger at the system. Not at Rachel. Maybe, he said, but I think no child should have to wait outside a school for a form to be processed. She met his gaze, surprised by his intensity. He softened. I know what it's like to feel invisible. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Rachel's eyes shimmered with the effort of holding herself together. We'll catch up, she said, as if promising herself more than him. I always do. It's just, sometimes it feels like running up a hill with no top. There was a long pause, filled only by the quiet clatter of cups behind the counter. Nathaniel wanted to reach across the table, to offer help, but he sensed the line she had drawn around her pride. He understood. I'd like to help. If I can, he said finally. Not just for you, for others in the same position. Rachel shook her head quickly, a small, sad smile on her lips. People don't just help. Mr. Carter, not without wanting something in return. That's not true, he replied, then hesitated, searching for the right words. Sometimes, people just remember what it was like to need a hand. Rachel considered this, her posture softening. You said your name was Carter, she asked, almost teasing, like Carter Innovations. He nodded, sheepish, guilty. My company helped start the school. Rachel's eyebrows lifted in surprise. So you're not just another dad? No, he admitted. But I'm here as a person, not a board member. She studied him in silence, her gaze assessing. Why, Rachel asked. Why do you care? Nathaniel looked out the window at the passing city, then back at her. Because someone cared for me, once. And because I believe Willow Ridge should stand for more than just privilege. The moment hung between them, a fragile connection built from honesty. Rachel's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Thank you, she said softly, but I can't accept charity. I want Zoe to know that nothing comes easy. but also that she deserves help when she needs it. Nathaniel respected her answer. "How about this?" he said. "Let's work together to make sure no other child has to stand outside those gates. Not just Zoe, all of them." Rachel's smile was genuine now, a little brighter. "I'd like that." Their conversation was interrupted by the clang of the kitchen bell. Rachel's break was over. She slid from the booth, smoothing her apron and reclaiming her composure. "Thank you for listening. Mr. Carter." "Nathan," he corrected, standing as well. "Please, call me Nathan." She nodded, then hurried back to her shift, but not before casting a grateful glance over her shoulder. Nathaniel left the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. The problem was bigger than one family, bigger than one school. He resolved to bring the issue to the Willow Ridge Board not just as an executive, but as a witness. The question echoed in his mind. How do you change a system that thinks exclusion is normal? He thought of Zoe's voice, trembling at the gate. He thought of Rachel's pride and his own mother's sacrifices. As he walked toward his car, Nathaniel felt a surge of both hope and fear. He knew the board would resist. He knew change would not come quietly. But something in him, old and stubborn and urgent, refused to let go. Not this time. The next morning, Nathaniel Carter arrived at Carter Innovations earlier than usual. His mind crowded with yesterday's conversations. The familiar rhythm of the security guard's greeting, the quiet hum of the elevator, even the stunning view of Seattle's skyline from his corner office, none of it soothed him. He sat for a moment at his desk, absently tapping a pen against his palm, replaying the image of Zoe Harper standing at the school gate. Rachel's guarded eyes. Ms. Park's polite but immovable professionalism. He wondered, not for the first time, how many of the systems he'd built meant to uplift were now just walls for people like them. His assistant, Carla, knocked lightly before entering. "Mr. Carter, the Willow Ridge board meeting is in conference room A. They're all assembled." Nathaniel nodded, forcing a smile of thanks, and slipped on his suit jacket. He moved through the glass corridors, noting the polished floors and silent halls, reminders of a world built on success. But today, that success felt hollow, almost brittle. In the conference room, sunlight bounced off sleek chrome and glass. Around the oval table sat the bored, familiar faces he'd known for years, most older, some younger, all well fed by comfort and security. Ms. Lorraine Park, the principal, was already seated, her folders organized in neat stacks. At the far end was Henry Maddox, the CFO, a man who seemed made entirely of sharp lines and cool logic. Nathaniel took his place at the head of the table. He looked around, meeting each gaze in turn. "Thank you all for coming," he began, steady but gentle. "I want to address a situation that occurred at Willow Ridge yesterday. A student, Zoe Harper, was turned away at the gate due to an overdue tuition payment. A few board members exchanged glances, some confused, others resigned. Maddox folded his hands. "Speaking first, our policies are clear. Families must pay on time, or they lose access to services." "That's been standard since the school was founded." Nathaniel nodded. "Yes, but perhaps it's time we question whether the standard serves us or simply protects us from discomfort." He paused, searching for the words. "I spoke to Zoe's mother. She works 2 jobs. She's tried every option we provide. She's not unwilling. She's overwhelmed. Yet, our answer is to leave her child outside, alone." A younger trustee, Mrs. Lynn, leaned forward. "We do have financial aid." "Nathaniel, there are forms, committees." We can't just let everyone in." Nathaniel heard the compassion in her tone, but also the caution. "I understand the need for process," he replied, "but I believe our process is failing the very children we claim to serve." Maddox's voice sharpened. "We cannot let emotion override discipline. If we make an exception for one, what do we say to the rest? To the families who make sacrifices, who borrow, who save, who pay?" For a moment, the room was tense with silent debate. Nathaniel felt the pressure, not just of policy, but of tradition. He remembered his own first scholarship interview, the way the principal looked at his thrift store shoes and second-hand backpack. He looked each board member in the eye. "I'm not proposing we abolish tuition, but that we create a buffer, a way to prevent a temporary hardship from becoming a child's exclusion, a fund, perhaps, or a grace period, something humane." Maddox frowned, the corners of his mouth tight. "That will cost money. The school isn't a charity. Nathaniel, even you know that." "Ms." Park spoke quietly. "There are families barely hanging on. Henry, the paperwork is daunting. Sometimes it feels like we're testing their resilience, not their need." The room fell silent. Nathaniel saw doubt flicker across a few faces, the old fear of opening the floodgates. He recognized it because he'd once shared it, a fear that, if you helped too many, you'd be left with nothing. Yet he'd learned the opposite in life, that kindness, carefully given, did not empty the well. He glanced at the window, where sunlight hit the polished table, casting shifting patterns. The vision for Willow Ridge, he said, was never just excellence. It was opportunity. We have the means to set an example for this city, maybe beyond. But that means meeting families where they are, not where we wish they could be. Maddox leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "Nathaniel, your story is admirable, but you're asking us to risk the school's stability on sentiment." Nathaniel felt the frustration burning beneath his ribs. For years, he'd believed change could be negotiated policy by policy, brick by brick. Now he wondered if it wasn't time to break the wall entirely. He remembered Rachel Harper's face in the cafe, the way she fought to keep her dignity. He saw Zoe in his mind, fingers clenched around her backpack. He could not, would not, let them be statistics. "I'm not asking for blind generosity," he said. "I'm asking for a system that sees the whole person, a process that is as flexible as it is fair. If that costs us comfort, so be it. Comfort has never been the purpose." Silence lingered. Then Maddox, calm but steely, replied, "Perhaps you're too close to this. Nathaniel, it's understandable, but dangerous. You're blurring the line between philanthropy and governance." Nathaniel felt his pulse quicken, the old urge to retreat rising. What if he was wrong? What if his compassion only led to chaos? In that moment, doubt crept in. Was he risking the school's future for the sake of his own conscience? Was this about Zoe, or about redeeming something lost in himself? He looked down at his hands, recalling the tremor in Rachel's voice when she spoke about Zoe's dreams. He remembered his own mother's silent resolve. The nights she sat up late with an old calculator, whispering numbers into the dark. "No," he thought, "this isn't about me. It's about the hundreds of families like Rachel's, who go unseen and unheard." "Mrs." Lynn broke the silence. "I think Mr. Carter's right. We can't ignore what we saw. Maybe a pilot program, a hardship fund, limited to emergencies. We could review it every quarter." There were murmurs of agreement from two other trustees, but Maddox shot her a look of warning. "You're opening a door you can't close," he said quietly. And if the budget tips, the board will hold you responsible. Nathaniel stood. I'll take that responsibility. I'll pledge the first contribution myself. I'll meet with Rachel Harper and draft guidelines. But we need to act now. Not another committee. Not another year. Ms. Park nodded, her voice just above a whisper. Let's try. For Zoe and for the others. Maddox stood, gathering his notes. I won't support it, but if the majority agrees, so be it. Just remember, every exception sets a precedent. Nathaniel watched as the board adjourned, relief and worry mixing in his chest. He had won a small, temporary victory, but Maddox's words echoed in his mind. Every exception sets a precedent. Hadn't he once believed the same back in his office? Nathaniel looked out over the city. The familiar view had changed. He saw not just the high-rises and cranes, but the neighborhoods below, the families waking early, the parents worrying over bills. He wondered if he was truly changing anything, or just soothing his own discomfort. He feared becoming the kind of leader who confused action with impact. A notification blinked on his phone, a message from Rachel Harper, brief and grateful, saying Zoe had come home happy for the first time in weeks. Nathaniel read it twice. A strange mixture of joy and sadness settled in his chest. He had made a difference for one child, but the weight of all the others still pressed down on him. That night, Nathaniel could not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with doubt and determination. He remembered being a boy, wishing for just one adult to say, I see you, you matter. He swore he would not let that wish go unanswered for Zoe, or any child like her, even if it meant standing alone. The air outside Willow Ridge Academy was brighter the next morning, with a gentle drizzle dappling the leaves and making the old brick shine. Nathaniel Carter arrived early, uncertain whether it was nerves or anticipation that had him crossing the campus before most staff had arrived. He watched the city slowly wake up through the iron gates, saw parents ushering children along the sidewalk, lunchboxes swinging, hair hastily braided. It all seemed so simple from a distance, but inside, he knew it wasn't simple at all. Zoe Harper stood with her mother at the front entrance. Rachel's hand rested on her daughter's shoulder, her grip both protective and encouraging. Zoe clutched her backpack, scanning the faces around her as if trying to memorize this moment. There was no sign of the little girl who had whispered in shame at the gates 2 days before. Today, her hair was brushed and neatly tied with a faded ribbon. Her shoes, though still scuffed, had been wiped clean. There was a fragile hope in her eyes that made Nathaniel pause. He saw Rachel catch his gaze and give a small nod tentative gratitude, but also a mother's warning. Don't let my child be hurt again. Inside the main office, Ms. Park greeted them with professional warmth, her smile a little softer than usual. Welcome back. Zoe, your teacher, Ms. Willis, is expecting you. Zoe's grip on her backpack tightened as a student aide led her away. For a heartbeat, she looked back, her eyes searching for her mother and for Nathaniel. He offered a reassuring wave. Rachel exhaled shakily, as if holding herself together with sheer will. Nathaniel turned to Rachel. I wanted to thank you for meeting with me, he said quietly, and for trusting us. Rachel managed a smile, tired but genuine. Thank you for not turning her away. I know it's not easy standing up to the system. Nathaniel shook his head. It's only the first step. There's a lot still to change. Rachel nodded, her face shadowed by the burden of hope. If you need anything, Just ask." He offered. She hesitated, then said softly, "Just be honest with her. She's strong, but she's also still a kid." As Zoe made her way to class, she felt every glance and whisper. Some students welcomed her back with bright curiosity. Others simply stared. At her desk, she fumbled to unpack her notebooks, careful not to draw attention to the worn edges or the names of cousins written in faded ink on the inside covers. Her teacher, Ms. Willis, gave her a warm smile. "We're glad to have you back. Zoe, there's a seat here for you." Zoe settled in, her heart thudding in her chest. She wanted so badly to belong, to melt into the routine and chatter of the room. At lunch, Zoe sat quietly at the edge of the table, unpacking a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and an apple, bruised but sweet. Some of the other girls eyed her lunch, their own trays holding neatly cut triangles, bright fruit, small bags of chips. Zoe tried to ignore their whispers, focusing instead on her apple, pretending not to notice the difference. But she saw it, felt it, in every bite. Across the room, Nathaniel stood near the doorway, blending into the background. He watched Zoe carefully, searching for any sign of distress. He saw how she held herself small, how she smiled politely at the jokes but rarely laughed. He saw how her fingers played with the hem of her sleeve, how she tucked her chin when anyone looked too closely. He recognized it all, the careful performance of invisibility. Meanwhile, Rachel spent her morning at the Willow Street Cafe. Unable to focus on the rush of customers or the hiss of steaming milk, her mind replayed every moment Zoe might face the sting of a careless word, the pitying glance from a teacher, the silent questions from other parents. She had always taught Zoe to be proud, to work hard, to accept help without feeling lesser. But pride was complicated, and hope, she'd learned, could be sharp as well as soft. When her shift ended, Rachel hurried to the school library, where Miss Park had offered her a volunteer spot organizing books, helping with story hour, a gesture of goodwill. The job was a balm, quiet and purposeful, and it gave Rachel a chance to watch Zoe from afar. She saw her daughter shyly approach a group at the reading nook, offering to help with a puzzle. She saw another girl, tall and confident, move aside just enough to make room. Rachel's heart soared and ached at once. After school, Nathaniel found Zoe waiting at the front steps. Her backpack was heavier than before, but her posture a little taller. "How was your day?" he asked gently. Zoe considered, then shrugged. "Okay. Some kids were nice. Some weren't." Nathaniel knelt beside her, careful not to crowd. "That's how life is sometimes. The important thing is you came back." Zoe looked at him, something searching in her gaze. "Did you ever feel different?" she asked. Nathaniel smiled. "Bittersweet. All the time. When I was your age. Sometimes even now." Zoe was quiet for a moment, then nodded as if making peace with an old truth. "Ms. Willis let me pick the book for story time. I chose one about stars." Nathaniel's eyes softened. "That's a good choice," it said. "Even when you can't see them, the stars are still there." He nodded, feeling the lump in his throat. "That's true for people, too." They walked together to the library, where Rachel waited, stacking books and chatting quietly with Ms. Park. When Zoe spotted her mother, she ran across the room, launching into a description of her day, what she'd read, the funny joke someone told, the way the paint on the classroom door peeled into the shape of a duck. Rachel listened, relief brightening her face. For the first time in weeks, Zoe's stories were filled with more laughter than worry. Nathaniel stood back, watching mother and daughter, feeling both like an intruder and a protector. He saw how quickly Zoe's confidence returned when she felt safe, how Rachel's shoulders dropped when her daughter smiled. He was reminded of something his own mother used to say sometimes. All a child needs is a reason to believe the world is kind. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel invited Rachel and Zoe for a treat at the small bakery next to the park. They sat by the window, sharing pastries and stories. Zoe watched the rain make rivers on the glass, drawing shapes with her finger. Rachel allowed herself to relax, laughing at one of Zoe's wild imaginings about a secret tunnel beneath the school. Nathaniel found himself wishing the moment could last forever, just the three of them, suspended in warmth and sugar and sunlight. On the walk home, Zoe skipped ahead, umbrella swinging, the city shining in the after rain. Rachel walked beside Nathaniel in easy silence. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I still worry about next month's bills, about what people might say. But today, I saw my daughter smile." Nathaniel felt the weight of her words settle gently in his chest. "That's enough for now," he said softly. "Tomorrow will take care of itself." As evening fell, Nathaniel returned to his apartment with the quiet satisfaction of having made a difference, even if only for a day. He replayed every smile, every small triumph, every moment of connection. He also knew the fight was far from over. But tonight, hope seemed a little less fragile, and kindness a little more possible. Word travels fast in a school like Willow Ridge, especially when something as unusual as a tuition dispute lands a child at its gates. By midweek, what had begun as a hushed conversation among administrators had spilled out into the lunchrooms, the pickup lines, and the private parent group chats. Parents speculated in code and whispers about the scholarship girl, the boardroom arguments, and why a powerful CEO was suddenly seen walking hand in hand with a little girl in a worn backpack. Nathaniel Carter felt the ripples even before he returned to the campus for his regular site visit. His assistant forwarded him a string of emails from concerned board members, laced with polite anxiety about precedent and public perception. Ms. Park requested a meeting about managing expectations, and on his way through the school lobby, he overheard two parents murmuring, their words clipped but unmistakable. "It's nice that he cares, but these policies exist for a reason. We can't just let anyone in, or the school will change." He understood their fear. Change, even when it was for the better, rarely felt safe at first. Inside her classroom, Zoe Harper noticed the shift as well. The first flush of welcome had faded, replaced by a subtle unease. She found her locker covered in a sticky note. Free lunch for the poor kid in jagged blue pen. In gym class. One of the girls rolled her eyes when Zoe joined her team. "Watch out. She might not be able to afford new shoes," she joked, loud enough for others to hear. Zoe forced herself to laugh along, cheeks burning. She tried to remember what her mother always told her. "You're not less. You're just new." But new, she realized, was sometimes just a softer word for different. Rachel Harper, too, felt the weight of new attention. At the cafe, customers greeted her with awkward sympathy. Some quietly congratulated her on finding a way in for her daughter. Others asked pointed questions about how she'd managed to get on Mr. Carter's good side. One woman suggested, with a hint of envy, that maybe Rachel should share her secrets. The truth, hard work, late nights, stubbornness, and a stranger's unexpected kindness felt too complicated to explain. After her morning shift, Rachel arrived at the school library to find Ms. Park waiting. The principal's tone was gentle but firm. "I wanted to check in," she began, glancing at the stacks of donated books. "Some of the parents are unsettled. There's been talk in the parent council about fairness. I want you to know, we're supporting Zoe, and we're supporting you. But it might be helpful if you spoke with some of the parents, just to ease concerns." Rachel bristled, a surge of old defensiveness rising. "You want me to explain why my daughter deserves to be here, Ms.?" Park shook her head quickly. "No, not at all. I just think sometimes a conversation can change a heart more than a policy ever could." Rachel's first instinct was to refuse, to shrink away from the scrutiny. But she saw the worry in Ms. Park's face and remembered Zoe's smile after her first day back. She owed it to her daughter to try. That evening, the Harper apartment was quieter than usual. Zoe worked at the kitchen table, head bent over a math worksheet, while Rachel reheated leftovers. The two talked about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding the subject of school drama. But when Rachel knelt to pack Zoe's bag for the next day, she found the sticky note wedged between two notebooks. Rachel's heart dropped. "Did someone leave this for you?" she asked gently. Zoe's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "It's nothing. Just a joke." Rachel pulled her daughter into a hug, stroking her hair. "You're not alone," she whispered, "no matter what they say." The next morning, Rachel tucked an extra note into Zoe's lunch. "You are brave. I love you." She sent a silent prayer that it would be enough. Nathaniel Carter spent his days juggling conference calls and policy drafts, but every free moment, his mind wandered back to the school. He reviewed proposals for a hardship fund, debated with Maddox about its scope, and fielded skeptical questions from the finance committee. Maddox's arguments grew sharper as the week went on. "If this gets out," the CFO warned, "the board could call for a vote of no confidence. You're risking not just your legacy, but the school's reputation." Nathaniel listened, feeling the familiar sting of self-doubt. Was he jeopardizing all he had built for the sake of one girl's story? Was he arrogant to think he could bend a system built over decades? But he remembered what Rachel had said in the cafe. People don't just help, not without wanting something in return. He wanted something, Nathaniel realized. He wanted a school where children weren't divided by invisible lines, where kindness was the norm and not the exception. On Friday, the school's parent council hosted a meeting in the auditorium. The room buzzed with anxious energy, folding chairs packed, voices low. Rachel sat near the back, hands clasped tight in her lap, wishing she could be anywhere else. Nathaniel sat at the front, back straight, every eye in the room flicking toward him. "Ms." Park opened the meeting with the usual announcements before addressing concerns about admissions transparency. A parent stood up, her voice quivering between civility and complaint. "I'm sure we all value generosity, but my question is if the rules don't apply to everyone. What's the point of having them at all?" Another parent added, "Some of us made real sacrifices to be here. It's not fair if others get in for free." The murmurs swelled. Rachel felt heat rising in her cheeks, the urge to disappear growing with every word. She heard her own story twisted into something cheap and suspicious. Nathaniel waited for the noise to subside before speaking. "I understand your concerns," he said, voice steady. "But hardship isn't something you can schedule. We all want the best for our children. The question is, do we want the best for everyone's child, or just our own?" There was an uneasy silence. Maddox, seated near the aisle, interjected, "Charity cannot be the model for sustainability. If you break the rules, you break trust." Rachel surprised herself and everyone else by standing. Her voice shook, But she didn't back down. I work. I pay what I can. I filled out every form, waited in every line. My daughter is not a charity case. She's a person, and she deserves a chance, just like yours. There was a shift in the room, a crack in the wall of suspicion. A few heads nodded. Some faces softened. Nathaniel felt something change. It wasn't a victory, but it was a beginning. After the meeting, a father approached Rachel quietly. I was on scholarship, too. When I was a kid, I'm glad your daughter's here. Rachel smiled, grateful for his kindness. Later, as Nathaniel walked Rachel and Zoe out to the parking lot, Zoe slipped her hand into his. "Did I do okay?" she whispered. Nathaniel bent down, meeting her eyes. "You did better than okay. You showed them what courage looks like." That night, Nathaniel reflected on the days since he'd first seen Zoe at the gate. He saw how quickly hope could curdle into jealousy, how easy it was for people to mistake fairness for favoritism. But he also saw something more powerful, the possibility of change, sparked by one honest voice in a crowded room. He wondered if the system would bend or simply snap back to its old shape. But for the first time, he believed the fight was worth it, not just for Zoe and Rachel, but for every child watching from the other side of the gate, waiting for someone to see them. Saturday morning dawned bright and cold, a rare patch of clear sky stretching above the city. Nathaniel Carter sat in his kitchen, coffee cooling beside a stack of untouched reports, his thoughts restless. The events of the week replayed in his mind like scenes from an unfinished play boardroom arguments. Rachel's trembling voice in the auditorium, Zoe's careful smile, the murmurs of parents who could not see past their own fears. Nathaniel wondered if he was truly making a difference or simply inviting more conflict, if his efforts were a balm for his conscience, or if they were the start of something real. His phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Thank you for standing up for us. Zoe is asking if you'd like to come to the park today. We could use a bit of sunlight." Nathaniel smiled, relief and hesitation mixing in his chest. The line between helping and intruding still troubled him. Was he building trust or crossing boundaries? He typed his reply, "I'd be honored." By late morning, the city park was busy with families bundled in jackets, children chasing soccer balls and laughter on the wind. Nathaniel found Rachel and Zoe near the playground, huddled on a bench beneath an old maple tree. Rachel looked more relaxed than he'd seen her all week, her hair loose, hands wrapped around a steaming cup. Zoe waved the moment she saw him, her face bright with the uncomplicated joy of a child who still believes that showing up is love enough. Nathaniel greeted them, and they began an easy stroll along the winding path. Rachel talked about her new routines at the library and cafe, her efforts to manage the constant balancing act of bills, shifts, and school notices. Nathaniel listened, asking questions not out of obligation, but genuine curiosity. He realized how much he wanted to know her, not as a problem to solve, but as a person with her own dreams and disappointments. As they walked, Zoe darted ahead, collecting fallen leaves and lining them up along the bench like treasures. At one point, she looked back and called, "Mr. Carter, look, this one's gold like magic." Nathaniel knelt beside her, admiring the leaf as if it really was gold. He felt a pang of gratitude for the ordinary beauty of this moment. A quiet Saturday. Sunlight through trees. Hope taking root in places he'd once overlooked. They settled on a blanket for a picnic lunch. Zoe chattered about her favorite library books and her plans to build a model of the solar system for science class. Rachel watched her daughter with a soft, private pride. Nathaniel saw it, and something inside him softened, too. He shared a story from his own childhood of building a rickety model rocket with his mother and the pride he'd felt watching it wobble skyward, even as the other kids laughed. Rachel smiled. "You must have had a good mom." Nathaniel nodded, the ache of loss rising and falling in his chest. "She did her best. Sometimes I think about how hard she worked to keep me from feeling like I didn't belong." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "Do you ever wish you could go back, change something?" He considered her question. "I wish I'd told her more often how much she meant to me. I wish I'd seen, back then, how much courage it took just to keep going." Rachel nodded. "Courage is invisible, isn't it? Nobody sees it until you've already run out." Nathaniel glanced at Zoe, who was now carefully tying the gold leaf to a stick, turning it into a makeshift flag. Maybe that's why it matters so much when someone notices. The afternoon passed in a gentle rhythm. Stories, laughter, small confessions. Zoe taught Nathaniel a clapping game, her hands sure and her smile wide. He found himself relaxing, the relentless drive to fix everything easing into a willingness to simply be present. He wondered when he had last felt so at ease, so open to the possibility that the world could be gentle again. Later, as they packed up their picnic, a group of Willow Ridge parents passed by, their voices sharp with recognition. Nathaniel saw the flicker of judgment in their eyes, the way they lingered just a moment too long on Rachel's discount sneakers and Zoe's patched jacket. Rachel stiffened, her face flushing, but Nathaniel met the parents' gaze with calm. One of them, a tall woman with an expensive coat, forced a smile. "Mr. Carter, we didn't expect to see you here," Nathaniel replied. "Just spending time with friends. It's a good day for it, isn't it?" The woman nodded, her tone brittle. "Yes. Well, we're all doing our best for our children. I hope you'll remember that." After the parents left, Rachel exhaled shakily. "Sometimes I wish I could disappear when they look at me like that." Nathaniel shook his head. "You don't have to. Their opinions aren't your measure." Rachel looked at him, searching for any hint of pity. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked quietly. "Stand with us. You could lose a lot." Nathaniel smiled, his voice gentle but certain. "There are some things I can't afford to lose. Self-respect is one of them." They walked home together, Zoe holding both their hands. Nathaniel sensed a change, a new ease between him and Rachel, a trust slowly forming not from grand gestures, but from the simple act of showing up. At the apartment door, Rachel paused. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" she asked, her voice uncertain but hopeful. Nathaniel hesitated, weighing propriety against the feeling that he belonged here, at least for this moment. "I'd love that," he said. "Inside." The apartment was small but full of warmth. Rachel busied herself in the kitchen while Zoe arranged her leaf collection on the windowsill. Nathaniel noticed the neat stacks of bills on the counter, the hand-labeled jars for rent, groceries, school fees. He felt both admiration and sorrow for how much Rachel carried. As Rachel poured coffee, first Nathaniel helped Zoe build her solar system using buttons for planets and string for orbits. For a while, all worries faded into the quiet joy of creation. Afterwards, as Zoe read on the couch, Nathaniel and Rachel sat at the small kitchen table. They talked about their childhoods, their parents, the ways the world felt both wider and smaller than it had when they were young. Rachel confided her fear that she was failing Zoe, that every day was just another test she might not pass. Nathaniel admitted his fear that he was failing the children he was supposed to protect, that leadership was just another word for being alone. Their words came haltingly at first, But soon the vulnerability became a kind of shelter. For the first time in years, Nathaniel allowed himself to imagine a life where success was measured not in achievements, but in belonging. When he finally arose to leave, Zoe looked up from her book. "Will you come to my science fair?" she asked. Nathaniel smiled. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Rachel walked him to the door, her hand lingering on the knob. "Thank you," she said, her eyes full of things she couldn't say out loud. Nathaniel shook his head. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me in." As he walked to his car beneath the darkening sky, Nathaniel felt lighter, steadier. He knew there would be more battles ahead, angry emails, difficult board meetings, parents who would never understand. But tonight, as the city lights blinked on and a child's laughter echoed in his memory, he felt certain he was exactly where he needed to be. Sunday morning at the Harper apartment was a portrait of ordinary grace. The hum of the coffee pot, the scrape of Zoe's pencil against a sheet of practice math, the sound of rain tapping on the window. Rachel Harper savored the peace, even as she wondered how long it might last. She looked at her daughter, brown hair tumbling over her face as she bent over her worksheet, lips moving silently as she worked through a tough problem. The week had been long, but Rachel could see the edges of Zoe's spirit shining through again, like light behind a thin curtain. A knock at the door broke the quiet. Rachel wiped her hands on a towel, heart quickening with that reflexive worry that never quite faded. When she opened the door, Nathaniel Carter stood there, holding a paper bag and an uncertain smile. "I brought cinnamon rolls," he said, "and maybe some help with long division." Rachel's worry melted into laughter. "You're braver than you look. Come in." Nathaniel set the bag on the table, the sugary warmth filling the small kitchen. He watched Zoe's face light up as she saw him. "We're doing fractions today," she announced, "and Mom says if I finish, I can paint this afternoon." Nathaniel grinned. "Math before art. That's cruel." Rachel arched an eyebrow, the easy humor between them feeling more natural now. "You can take it up with the teacher." They spent the next hour at the table, Nathaniel drawing pie charts and inventing silly math problems about dragons and treasure. Zoe giggled, her cheeks flushed with effort and triumph as she solved each new challenge. Rachel sat nearby, quietly folding laundry, but her eyes were bright and grateful. The room felt full, not just with sound, but with belonging, a comfort so rare that Rachel dared not name it for fear it might disappear. After the homework was done, Zoe bounded off to the bedroom to fetch her paint set. Rachel poured more coffee, sitting across from Nathaniel in the rare quiet. "You're good with her," she said softly. Nathaniel looked down, modest. "It's easy with Zoe. She's curious, brave." Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. "I haven't seen her like this in a long time." She hesitated, searching his face for some sign that this was all real. "I used to think hope was just something you put on for show, like a coat that never quite fit." Nathaniel reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Hope's real, even if it feels strange at first." The conversation shifted to lighter things, favorite childhood games, the best secret places in the city, memories of summer nights and lightning bugs. Rachel found herself telling Nathaniel stories she'd never told anyone, about the year she and Zoe planted wildflowers in the empty lot behind their old building, or how they used to invent songs on rainy nights when the lights flickered out. Nathaniel listened, his expression soft. He realized he hadn't shared this kind of unguarded conversation in years. The world outside faded, leaving only the here and now. Zoe returned, face smudged with paint. carrying a half-finished canvas of swirling blue and gold. "It's the night sky," she said shyly. "But I made the stars extra bright." Nathaniel admired her work, remembering his mother's words, "Never let anyone tell you what your sky should look like." He told Zoe the painting was beautiful, and she beamed, holding it up to show her mom. The rain let up by afternoon, so the three ventured outside to the city park, the ground soft beneath their shoes. Zoe ran ahead, chasing puddles and singing to herself. Rachel and Nathaniel strolled behind, shoulders occasionally brushing, the silence between them comfortable. They watched Zoe climb the play structure, her laughter ringing clear. "I keep thinking this isn't real," Rachel confessed, her voice low, "that I'll wake up, and you'll be gone, and it will be just me and Zoe again." Nathaniel stopped, turning to face her. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, gentle but resolute. "Not unless you tell me to." Rachel looked away, blinking quickly. "You know, when I lost my husband, I thought that was it, that you only get one shot at being a family." Her words caught, fragile and honest. "But Zoe, she needs more than just me. I see that now." Nathaniel took her hand, squeezing gently. "You both deserve more, and not because someone gives it to you out of pity or charity, because you matter, because you belong." They stood for a moment, the city sounds swirling around them. Rachel felt something shift inside her, an old fear loosening its grip. When they caught up with Zoe, she pulled them both into her game hide-and-seek among the trees, laughter echoing as the sun broke through the clouds. In those moments, the world was small and safe. By evening, the Harper apartment was alive with the comforting mess of a day well spent damp jackets, muddy shoes, the scent of cinnamon lingering in the kitchen. Zoe finished her painting, propping it on the windowsill for the city to see. Rachel cooked a simple dinner, Nathaniel setting the table, the three moving in quiet coordination. Afterward, Zoe curled up with a book, her head in her mother's lap, feet in Nathaniel's. Rachel stroked her daughter's hair, watching Nathaniel as he gazed out the window, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "All the choices you made to get here." Nathaniel smiled, a rueful twist to his lips. "Every choice has a price. There were things I lost along the way, time, peace, sometimes even myself. But if I hadn't made those choices, I wouldn't have met you, or Zoe." Rachel nodded, understanding in her bones what he meant. "I used to think starting over meant admitting you failed," she murmured. "But maybe it just means you're brave enough to try again." That night, after Zoe was asleep, Nathaniel stood at the door, keys in hand, reluctant to leave the warmth behind. Rachel lingered, the air between them heavy with things unsaid. Finally, she stepped forward, hugging him tightly. He held her, feeling her tremble and then settle, as if something inside her had finally decided it was safe to hope again. "Good night, Nathan," she whispered. He kissed her forehead gently. "Good night, Rachel." As he walked to his car, Nathaniel felt a quiet certainty growing in his chest, a sense that their lives, once running on separate tracks, were slowly converging. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of something unfolding, something real. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, still resistance from the board, from parents, even from the world outside. But tonight, he chose to believe in the slow power of kindness, the possibility of new beginnings. Monday came dressed in fog, the city muffled and gray as the school week began. Nathaniel Carter arrived at Willow Ridge Academy early, carrying not just his briefcase, but the quiet ache of uncertainty. His steps echoed through the empty hallway, each one a reminder of how quickly hope could be shaken by reality. He was scheduled to meet Ms. Lorraine Park and Henry Maddox for a follow-up on the Pilot Hardship Fund, a meeting that felt heavier than most. As he entered the main office, Nathaniel found Ms. Park waiting with 2 mugs of coffee, her face drawn but kind. Maddox arrived moments later, punctual and already frowning over a stack of financial statements. "We're running over budget," Maddox began, skipping any greeting. "The hardship fund is drawing more applications than projected. The board is restless." Nathaniel took a slow breath. "That's what happens when people finally believe they might be seen," he replied quietly. "Ms. Park tried to broker calm. "The new policy is working. Families are coming forward who never dared before. The atmosphere has changed, even among the teachers." Maddox shook his head, scanning a list. "But it's unsustainable at this pace. Nathaniel, you've started something we can't afford to finish." Nathaniel felt the pressure settle on his shoulders. It was the old battle heart versus numbers, vision versus risk. Was he building real change, or just another crisis? "I'll speak to the board," Nathaniel promised. "We can review funding options, private donors, partnerships. If the problem is bigger than we thought, then so is the need." Maddox's eyes narrowed. "And what if the board pushes back? Are you prepared to take responsibility if this experiment fails?" Nathaniel looked at Ms. Park, saw the hope and worry mingled in her eyes. "I am," he said, "but I'm not giving up on it. Not now." Outside, the fog had begun to lift, and children streamed through the gates. Nathaniel watched Zoe Harper arrive, hand in hand with her mother. Rachel was bundled in her old coat, face bright with quiet pride. Nathaniel met her eyes through the office window, and she smiled, the silent exchange saying more than words could. He knew she sensed the tension in the air, knew she had been on the edge of too many systems that promised much and delivered little. Inside her classroom, Zoe sat at her desk, surrounded by the gentle chaos of the morning. She had grown more confident, volunteering answers, sharing her art projects, even laughing with the girls who had once mocked her. But small cruelties lingered, side glances, whispered jokes. Every now and then, Zoe would come home quiet, her spirit bruised by the unkindness of children who didn't understand what it meant to always be on the outside. Rachel noticed the changes, too. The joy of belonging was often matched by the fear it might not last. She watched other mothers at drop-off, saw their ease, their laughter, their confidence in a world that had always included them. At times, Rachel still felt like an imposter, waiting to be discovered and sent away. She carried these doubts home, folding them into her evenings, holding them close so Zoe wouldn't see. That week, Nathaniel made a point to visit the community library where Rachel volunteered. He found her at a back table, organizing a stack of battered picture books, her hair falling loose around her face. He watched her for a moment before approaching, noting the gentle way she touched each book, the care she gave to even the smallest task. Taking over the world, one story at a time, he teased, setting down a fresh box of donated books. Rachel smiled, but her eyes were clouded with worry. "I'm trying," she said, "but it feels like every time I take a step forward, someone reminds me where I started." Nathaniel sat beside her, lowering his voice. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, Rachel. Not for your story, not for your place here. You belong as much as anyone." She nodded, but he could see the uncertainty in her posture. They talked quietly as they sorted books, sharing updates on Zoe, the school, the latest parent council rumors. Nathaniel felt the familiar urge to fix everything, but he also knew that sometimes the bravest thing was simply to listen. He asked about Rachel's dreams, what she wanted beyond surviving, beyond keeping up. She hesitated at first, then confessed, "I always wanted to be a teacher. Before everything happened, before life got in the way." Nathaniel's smile was gentle. "You'd be a great one." Maybe someday, Rachel laughed, soft but hopeful. Maybe, for now, it's enough to help other kids love stories. He wanted to promise her more, to say he would help make it happen, but he knew those words had to be earned, not given. That afternoon, the school buzzed with preparations for the upcoming science fair. Zoe worked with a small group of friends, building a solar system out of painted foam balls and glitter. She was proud of her project, and even prouder to have been chosen to present to the whole school. At home, she practiced her speech in front of the mirror, Rachel clapping and laughing at every planet fact. Nathaniel offered to help with the finishing touches, stopping by one evening with a bag of craft supplies and pizza. The three of them sat on the floor, cutting stars out of foil, painting Saturn's rings, sharing stories about the universe. For a while, the troubles outside faded away. They became just a small family, creating something together that was theirs alone. After Zoe had gone to bed, Nathaniel and Rachel sat in the kitchen, the city lights soft through the window. Rachel confessed how much she feared losing this new sense of belonging, how every good day felt fragile, as if it could vanish with the wrong word or a missed payment. Nathaniel listened, his own doubts echoing hers. He wanted to say he could protect them from disappointment, but he knew the world didn't work that way. Instead, he said, "I don't know what the board will decide. I don't know if the fun will last, or if we'll have to fight even harder. But I want you to know, no matter what happens, you and Zoe have changed me. You've made me see what matters. I'm not going to walk away." Rachel reached across the table, her fingers twining with his. That's all I needed to hear. Later that week, Nathaniel received an email a special board meeting had been called. The subject line was blunt: Emergency Budget Review. He knew what it meant. The fight was about to get harder. He stared at the screen, a wave of fatigue rolling through him. But beneath the fear, there was a stubborn resolve. He would not let Zoe and all the children like her be forgotten again. The night before the meeting, he found himself walking through the quiet city, replaying the events that had brought him here. He thought of his mother, of the sacrifices she'd made. He thought of Rachel's laughter, Zoe's courage, the hope that flickered every time someone chose kindness over convenience. He wondered what kind of legacy he wanted to leave. And for the first time, the answer was clear: a legacy built on people, not just policies, on courage, not just comfort. He went to bed late, the city silent outside his window. As he drifted to sleep, he remembered the day he'd first seen Zoe at the school gates, and how everything since had felt like a second chance, not just for her, but for him, too. The conference room was colder than usual, the fluorescent lights humming overhead as the board gathered for what everyone knew was the most critical meeting yet. Nathaniel Carter entered with measured steps, feeling the weight of expectation settle on him like a heavy cloak. Around the long table sat familiar faces, board members, trustees, and Henry Maddox, whose steely gaze cut through the room like a blade. Ms. Lorraine Park offered Nathaniel a small, encouraging smile as he took his place at the head of the table. The room fell silent, the tension so thick it seemed to hum between the polished wood and leather chairs. Henry Maddox began, his voice sharp and unyielding. The hardship fund has been bleeding the budget dry. Despite projections, applications have tripled. We are on the brink of financial insolvency. Several members nodded gravely, their faces taut with concern. Nathaniel met Maddox's gaze steadily. The increase in applications reflects a deeper truth. More families are struggling than we accounted for. The system was never designed to catch them. This fund is a lifeline, not a drain. His voice was calm, but every word carried conviction. A trustee raised a hand. But what of those who have paid in full, sacrificed to send their children here? Are we telling them their sacrifices mean less, that some children get a pass? The question echoed loudly. Nathaniel leaned forward. This isn't about giving a pass. It's about fairness and compassion. We are a community. When one struggles, we lift each other up. I believe the board should stand for that ideal. Murmurs rippled around the room, some approving, others skeptical. Ms. Park added, teachers have reported noticeable changes, more engaged students, fewer absences. The fund has impact beyond finances. Her words softened the room, but Maddox was unyielding. Impact is important, yes, but sustainability is paramount. We cannot gamble the school's future on hope alone. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. It's not a gamble. It's an investment in our values and in the future of every child who walks through these gates. The debate stretched for hours, voices rising and falling like waves. Nathaniel presented detailed projections, proposed partnerships with local nonprofits, and outlined plans to increase fundraising. Maddox countered with cold fiscal realities, warnings of credit downgrades and donor pullback. At one point, the tension reached a breaking point. Maddox slammed a folder on the table. Mr. Carter, your idealism blinds you to the risk. You're jeopardizing the school's reputation and stability. If the board loses confidence, it could cost you your position. The threat hung in the air, sharp and personal. Nathaniel met the challenge head on. I'm here to serve this community, not myself. If that means standing alone, then so be it. But I won't abandon these families to bureaucratic neglect. The room fell silent again, the passion in his voice impossible to ignore. In the end, the board voted narrowly to continue the fund, with conditions to review its impact quarterly and tighten application processes. It was a fragile victory, but a victory nonetheless. After the meeting, Nathaniel walked outside into the crisp evening air, the city lights sparkling like distant stars. His phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. We're so proud of you. Zoe is already talking about her science fair project with new excitement. A small smile tugged at Nathaniel's lips. The fight was far from over, but moments like this reminded him why it mattered. As he walked home, his mind replayed the journey, every whispered doubt, every quiet hope, every small act of courage. He thought of Zoe's laughter, Rachel's strength, and the promise that kindness, when chosen fiercely, could ripple beyond walls and budgets. The days after the board meeting passed in a blur of activity for Nathaniel Carter. The narrow victory had come with conditions, but it was a foothold, a chance to prove that compassion could coexist with responsibility. He threw himself into the work, reaching out to community leaders, local businesses, and philanthropists, seeking allies to sustain the hardship fund. Meanwhile, Rachel Harper found her own strength growing in unexpected ways. The support from the fund meant she could breathe a little easier, focus on building a steady routine for Zoe, and even dream of a future where teaching was within reach again. The neighborhood began to feel less like a place of survival and more like home, At school, Zoe blossomed in ways that surprised even her teachers. Her confidence grew, and she began to take on leadership roles in group projects and school events. She still faced moments of exclusion, but the warmth of new friendships and the steady presence of Rachel and Nathaniel gave her roots to stand tall. One afternoon, Nathaniel joined Zoe's class for a reading session, sitting cross-legged on the colorful rug. He listened as the children took turns reading aloud. When it was Zoe's turn, she spoke clearly and with pride, her voice carrying across the room. Nathaniel felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of pride, hope, and the weight of responsibility. After the session, Ms. Lorraine Park pulled Nathaniel aside. "Zoe is doing wonderfully. She's become an example for many." She looked thoughtful. "Your involvement has changed more than the policy. It's changed the culture." Nathaniel smiled, humbled. "We still have a long way to go." Back in the office, Nathaniel faced Maddox with renewed resolve. The CFO had proposed tighter budget cuts, threatening to scale back the fund in the next quarter. Nathaniel challenged the data, showing how investment in students like Zoe led to higher retention, better academic outcomes, and stronger community support. The battle was ongoing, but Nathaniel was no longer alone. Teachers, parents, and even some board members were rallying behind the cause. One evening, after a late meeting, Nathaniel found himself wandering through the city streets, his mind racing. The fight for fairness was draining, filled with small victories and setbacks. He wrestled with the pressure, questioning whether he had the stamina to keep going, whether his vision was worth the toll it took on his relationships and health. At the same time, Rachel called him, her voice warm but weary. "Zoe got the highest score on her science fair project today," she said softly. "She wants to thank you for believing in her." Nathaniel's heart lifted. "Tell her I'm proud of her," he replied, "and that I believe in her, too." That night, Nathaniel lay awake thinking about legacy. Not the skyscrapers or deals, but the lives changed by small, steady acts of courage. He thought of Zoe's smile, Rachel's strength, and the community they were building. It was messy and difficult, but real. The turning tide was slow, but it was coming. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the windows of Willow Ridge Academy's courtyard, casting a warm glow on the gathering of teachers, parents, students, and board members. It was a celebration unlike any other, a coming together not only to mark the end of a challenging school year, but to honor the resilience, courage, and growth that had defined the community's journey. Nathaniel Carter stood quietly to the side, watching Zoe Harper as she twirled between chairs in a white dress dotted with tiny sunflowers, her laughter light and free. She held a handmade bouquet of paper flowers, each petal carefully folded and colored. The innocence and joy in her eyes filled Nathaniel with a profound sense of accomplishment, not in the boardroom victories or financial reports, but in the real lives touched. Rachel Harper stood nearby, tears shimmering as she watched her daughter. The weight of the past months, the struggle, the uncertainty, the small triumphs was visible in her proud smile. Nathaniel caught her eye and nodded, a silent exchange that spoke of shared battles and newfound hope. The ceremony began with speeches that highlighted not just academic achievements, but acts of kindness, perseverance, and community. Zoe was called to the stage to receive a special award for kindness, a recognition that meant more to Rachel than any scholarship or accolade. Zoe's voice was steady as she thanked her teachers and friends, her cheeks flushed with pride. Later, as the crowd mingled beneath the blooming oak trees, Nathaniel found a quiet moment with Lorraine Park. This year has been transformative, she said softly. More than just policy. It's been about changing hearts. Nathaniel smiled. And it's just the beginning. Back at the Harper apartment that evening, the quiet was full of warmth. Zoe's drawings adorned the walls, vibrant colors breathing life into the small space. Rachel and Nathaniel sat together, hands intertwined, the comfort of their connection grounding them. They spoke of plans: Rachel's enrollment in teaching classes, Nathaniel's commitment to expanding the fund, and the family they were building slowly, carefully. Nathaniel reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from the first moment he saw a little girl crying at the school gates, to the countless small acts of courage that had woven their lives together. He realized that true leadership wasn't about control or power. It was about vulnerability, presence, and the willingness to fight for what mattered, even when the odds seemed against you. As the city lights twinkled outside, Nathaniel thought about the future, a future where no child would have to stand outside a school gate wondering if they belonged, where kindness and opportunity weren't luxuries, but rights. He thought about Zoe's laughter, Rachel's strength, and the quiet promise they all carried forward. The story wasn't perfect. There were still battles ahead, moments of doubt, and challenges that would test them, but it was real. It was theirs, and in that truth lay a new dawn. Thank you for joining us on this moving journey of courage, compassion, and change. Zoe's story reminds us that beneath every statistic is a child yearning to belong, a family struggling to be seen, and a community waiting to be transformed. It challenges us to confront the harsh realities of inequality and exclusion, and to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to build? One that leaves children standing outside the gates, or one that opens doors with kindness and fairness? Let this story be a call to action, to recognize the unseen battles, to stand against discrimination in all its forms, and to remember that real power lies in lifting others up, not tearing them down. The legacy we leave is shaped not just by wealth or status, but by the hearts we touch and the lives we change. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with friends who need to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and challenge. Together, we can create a community that listens, learns, and loves deeper every day. Stay with us for the next story, because every voice matters, and every story deserves to be heard.